Okay, so we want to charge the folks from Vail and Nissa to make sure that if they decide to bring their business here, incidentally, there's a Les Schwab in Nissa, there's a Les Schwab in Vail. Where are the farmers taking their business now? Just with the discussion of the implementation of the tax, you can ask those managers and ask this manager what's happened to the gross sales of these businesses. And you'll find out that if you want to pass the tax on to someone else that lives in some other community and not pay it yourself, then that's fine. Now, let me come back to the tax itself. There's a couple of pensioners in this audience. And remember that a pensioner is going to spend every dime he or she has. And it's going to be spent on nearly 100%. You say, oh, wait a minute, no, there's rent in that process. There's utilities in that process. Well, guess what? All of the rent will eventually, the rents will have to include the sales tax in it, because anything that's built in Ontario is going to have a sales tax charged to it. That's a fee that'll be charged, and that cost then is going to be passed on to those folks. So what you're talking about is that almost 100% of that pensioner's income is going to be subject to the sales tax. So if he gets $20,000 and spends $20,000, he or she, then that's only $200 a year. And you mentioned that, wait a minute, we've got a new $8 fee, $96 a year that goes against our water bill. But then I read in the newspaper that we're going to give all employees in the city $600 a year if they'll stay in the city limits. We're going to give them $600 a year of that $96 back. So we must have some extra dough. So I'm going to say this. That person who spends 100% of his income in Ontario is going to spend 1% more when they're all done, and that person who saves, and there's a few savers in this audience, that person who saves a little bit, for them, that tax is not as regressive. This is the most regressive of all taxes, a sales tax, because the poor pay the tax. And yes, will the poor from Fruitland and Payette and Vail and Nissa, will the poor in the agriculture community come in and pay it too? Yeah, they will. But don't ask the farmers. And here, this is the exemption that's going to be run in the City Hall, and this minuscule department that we've got is going to exempt all the farmers. And incidentally, the farmers are really delighted about the opportunity. I've talked to several of them. They're really delighted about the opportunity of copying their tax return and sending it down to City Hall. Like that's going to happen, they'll take their business out of the community faster than you can shake a lambskin.
Do we have any other questions before we review the definition of pontificate?
Marty Justice, broker owner for Real Estate City Council. So, first off, we have 30,000 people coming to the town on a regular basis. I would call Ontario a destination city. 1. 2, if you say that the 1% is going to affect the rental rates, I'm going to tell you that supply and demand affect the rental rates much more. I'm in the business. I know that rents have gone up 25% in 5 years because of supply and demand. Right? The 1% is not what's going to affect the rent. Now, if you put property taxes, including recreational fees, police fees, we can do districts, all that done, and you add that onto your tax bill, you're absolutely right. Rents will go up. Those poor people will be paying a lot more monthly. You are absolutely correct. I agree with you 100%. But those are the 3 things I wanted to address. Thank you.
And your question was?
Are we a destination city?
Do we want to answer for a destination city? City Manager Adam Brown.
I'll just tell you what the facts are as far as that. We gross $614 million in sales. Our a community our size would generate $115 million. If you cross multiply, you come to a population of about 55,000. That's just with hard numbers.
Do you have a question?
Tess Weinberger, Ontario. I'm also on the City Council. I actually feel that I didn't quite get the answer for this gentleman's question, and I'd like to restate it if that's okay with everyone. The question would be, with your proposed ideas of a levy, a recreational district, things like that, all of that burden goes on to the Ontario taxpayers. How would you even that burden out with people across the river and in other surrounding communities?
That's a good question, Councilwoman. You can't tax people across the river, but you can encourage them to come to Ontario, which will increase to 55,000 the population, the shopping population. Ontario's SMA, Standard Metropolitan Area, is much greater than Fayette. It's actually much greater than many mid-sized towns throughout the area. So how do you pass that on? That is a property tax fee, and first of all, it doesn't automatically happen. Nobody gets a serial levy without making the case for it. And so if the City Council cannot make the case for it, if the members of the City Council say, nah, it's going to be too tough to pass a $100,000 serial levy to take care of our police department, to take care of our fire department, if they cannot make the case for it, then it won't happen. Bottom line, it will not happen. Question I've got is, have we gone to every department head and said, where can you make 10% cuts? That's what we did in Salem. That's what we did in Salem, and you know what? We didn't have to raise the taxes because the folks came back and said, here's where we can make the cuts. And after we made 10% cuts and the revenue projections were still down, then we went back for 3 to 5% cuts. You know what? Every department was able to make those cuts. Every one. Now, that doesn't mean that a serial levy will be automatically paid for by someone else. But it does mean that the 55,000 people who come here to shop are going to keep our economy vibrant and have that ability for the small stores and the small businesses and the other folks in Ontario to be able to have the shopping population that sustains their stores. They do it on a cost basis analysis. If you can't keep your store open, Kmart, if you can't keep your store open, then you just go ahead and leave it vacant for a few years. And how much tax do we collect off of a vacant store? How much tax are we collecting on the vacant stores on Oregon Street? You gotta have a vibrant business community, and you do that by assuring people the safety from the folks that are in his neighborhood, and you do that by having this as a welcome place. The one advantage we've got over the folks across the river is we do not have a sales tax. And if you think they'll just continue to come here when you start implementing a sales tax, then I think we're fooling ourselves. I would say this also, the comment was made that there are $614 million in sales, and the projection is that they're only going to lose somewhere between 3 and 5 and maybe 8 or 10% of those sales. Well, guess what? Then the community diminishes considerably, and the businesses and the vacancies. And we don't want to see that happen because that starts to be a domino effect, unfortunately, in our community. And I guess finally, in that regard, what we want to do is we want to show that Ontario can make decisions about, yes, we can go ahead and sustain our police force. We can sustain our other vital services that are so important to our community. And I guess I'd ask this of the City Council members that are here. How many of you are paying the business registration fee? How many of you are collecting the tax under the new laws? Collecting the tax. How many of you have to implement that? And then I would say this. For those organizations that do not have to collect the tax, who have exempted themselves from the tax, did they, under Oregon law, recuse themselves from the vote? They did not. Folks, all I'm telling you is that I don't have confidence in folks that can come forward and say, yes, we will do this a harder way rather than the easier way.
Do you have a
I got a
question?
question. Thaddeus Babby. When it comes to implementing, it's probably Mr. Brown.
Can you hear him okay?
When it comes to implementing the tax with this, the person that's going to collect it, how are they going to go? Is it going to be like a monthly payment, quarterly, yearly? How is this person going to go through the business's books and determine the tax is correct? And what if it isn't? Is there going to be a big fine? What if they say, hey, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. Then what happens? Are you going to take the business license, or are you going to another fine, or how are you going to possibly implement that with all the businesses? First, going to go through everybody's books.
So the question is the actual administration of it. How often do payments need to be made? How will the proper amount be levied? Is that
How are they
the
going to know?
question?
How will they know? I mean, unless they're going through the business's books, if the business is going to let them do that, it's like confession time. They're going to have to go through the books, determine the revenues, and they're going to have to determine if the sales tax was correct. And if it's not, is there going to be a fine? What will they do?
So that was a couple of the questions that I had as well. Is how do you do that, especially when you're trying to sort through some exemptions, which I'm going to ask you guys more questions on. Do you want to tackle this at this point?
Well, the good thing is we don't have to amend the process because it's done in 47 other states. The way it's written is that it would be collected and assessed quarterly. It's a simple form. You operate on a basis of trust first, and the ordinance, as proposed, outlines a process for a third-party auditor, so the city doesn't have to get in the books. And then also for collections, right now we have a utility billing clerk that handles 3,200 utility bill accounts. We're pretty sure we can handle 400 accounts with one additional person. We may not even use a person because I've already been contacted by a number of firms who handle it directly, business firms. That's their business, is they collect local sales tax. So that's a possibility too. We've gone far enough into it to have a grasp on the number and how we do it. We haven't spent an inordinate amount of time because we got to wait to see what the voters say about it. So it's just like as soon as the petition approved, we tried to push something out on social media that said, don't do anything yet because it's going to go through the voters. So if you look back on our Facebook, you can find that because we didn't want to incur the expenses until the issue was decided by the voters. So, did I miss anything?
No, I got probably a few questions, but Walmart, Home Depot, they're going to be paying too? Because I've heard they're not going to do it to tie you up in litigation. So what's the deal? Is that true or not?
No, I don't. The question was, is Walmart and Home Depot and the other big box stores going to pay for, or large corporate stores? We have not heard any comment from them at all to the negative or the positive. There's nothing to indicate they wouldn't pay it. They haven't told us that. For them, they use the same database in Arkansas as they use here in Idaho or Oregon for a Walmart, and it's a matter of putting a number in a database, applying a percentage. Same with Home Depot out of Atlanta.
Question? Okay. No. I'll be nice to you. You gave blood today.
Yes, I did. And I apologize for being late because of that. I want to preface this by saying that a lot of great things have happened in this community over the last 30 years that I've lived here on and off. I came to this middle school and I was bullied horribly at this middle school. And the school district has done a tremendous job of making the schools great places to be students. My question is inspired by a post that I read by Jill Miller this morning. I encourage anyone to look at it. Do you three up here believe that Ontario deserves to be great as a community and to have all the services that we yearn for, especially in terms of parks and recreation? And if so, how are we going to pay for it? I know that the tax may not pass, but if it doesn't, what do you have in mind, or do you just think that we don't deserve that? Thank you.
Anybody want to tackle that? Start us off?
Absolutely. The rec department or parks, these are an extremely important part of our community. And, I emphasize the police department because that really is at the pinnacle of the safety of the community. But all of these issues, whether we're talking about the police department, fire department, parks, recreation, all of it is important for our community. We have to figure out ways of actually satisfying the needs of the community with the income that we have coming in to the city. Mr. Butler intimated that he has very little trust in the folks on the city council. Now, the folks on the city council are elected by our community to make the hard decisions sitting on the city council. He also mentioned that he is against the sales tax. I didn't hear an outcry from him when 0.5% was placed on our automobiles. I didn't hear an outcry from him when our bicycles have an added fee on them. I didn't even hear from him.
Salem that implemented those taxes, not you. They heard it in Salem. That 0.5% is a Salem collected tax,
Right.
and they heard it in Salem.
Not from you.
They did hear it from me, and you didn't implement the tax, Salem did, the sales tax on automobiles. I was in the DMV when a veteran stopped beside me and paid $3,200 for his camp trailer, and he's over in Camp Lejeune and had to pick up his camp trailer just recently. He bought last year, and he's paying that tax, and he wasn't very happy about it, and I'm not very happy about it, but it's a sales tax on automobiles that is supposed to protect our roads, and out of it we're going to get, I think, some kind of a transfer station in this.
Well, thank you. But the bottom line on this whole thing is fairness, our community, and how are we going to keep the quality of life in our community? And I still maintain that we as citizens of Ontario should not foot the whole bill ourselves. We absolutely should not. 1 cent on a dollar is not going to chase 30 to 50,000 people away from our community. 1% is a very small amount for everyone to share in the expenses of our community. Not only the quality of life issues that you're talking about, that you've asked about, but also the safety of our community. You talked, Mr. Butler, about the cereal levy. Now, does that cereal levy actually put the burden on the community, or does it share it with all of the individuals coming into our community using our services?
That's a question for me, I'll answer it. Yeah. When there's a cereal levy tax, it's a property tax. And who pays your property tax if you're in business? Your customers are paying the property tax. You pass it on to them. And so everybody pays the property tax. Ultimately, it is paid for by the consumer. For that person who's making $100,000 in gross sales, when his property tax goes up, he raises his fees. So as much as we possibly can. But when we're going to have everybody pay 1%, then at that particular point, how fair is that for that pensioner who's spending 100% of his income or her income on expendable items that are covered by the sales tax? And I'd like the answer to that.
Oh, we're always good.
So, Mr. Schock would like the answer to his original question from Mr. Butler as well.
And that's with regard to the fairness? Was that the question?
No, that was quality of city.
Quality of city?
This was with regard to, don't we deserve to have great services, great parks and recreation?
Absolutely, absolutely. Nobody's saying that we shouldn't have them. Okay, and what's happened to the value, or what's happened to the appropriateness of those services during the last 20 years? Gone up or down?
Spiraling.
Yeah, spiraling down. And all of a sudden we're going to be able to find a magic cure from that by charging the folks in the rural community, Vail and Nissa and Harper and wherever, and of course those folks that come across to shop, we're going to charge that to them, and they're going to be happy to pay it, and they'll continue. And it isn't 30 to 50,000 people that we lose, but because we still have 30,000 people that live here in Malheur County.
With respect, sir, 10% budget cuts across the board are not going to bring great services in terms of parks and recreation. What is your solution to providing great services for parks and recreation?
First of all, I'm not on the city council. I don't have all of the answers from the city council. I've never been invited to sit on their budget board. So I can't tell you what they have considered and haven't considered. I didn't know until this evening when some council members start shaking their head, yes, we've gone back for a 10% cut. Honestly, I didn't see the cut come in any department, but perhaps you have seen 10% cuts across the board, including administration. Did anybody hear about a 10% cut in administration at City Hall? I'm sorry, I must have missed that. I saw a raise coming to these folks. When I went to get my dog tag, I was told, hey, wait a minute, that's something that takes not the priority in City Hall that something else has. So the services are already compromised. And so what I'm saying is, if you want those services, don't try and pass them on to the pensioner who lives here. For that family that spends 100% of their income, don't try and pass it on to them. Pass it on to the property owners in the form of a cereal levy. After you've made the case, make the case. Go to the people and tell them, we need $1 million. And yes, it will be paid for by the businesses. It will be paid for by homeowners. We're already paying for the library district. We're already paying for the sales tax, or the property tax for the city and the county. We're paying for our schools. Yes, it's going to cost us. It's going to cost us to keep great schools too. But how do I assure you that you're going to have everything you want and everything you need by trying to pass the tax off to the farmers between Ontario and Vail and Ontario and Nissa? I'm sorry. That is a dream world. We cannot pass the tax on to somebody else without hurting ourselves too. We're going to pay it, one way or another.
So I have a couple of points of, I guess, clarification. My thoughts come to this. Is agriculture, as it stands, and without getting into the weeds of exemptions changing, but as it is currently intended, is agriculture exempt?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So for me, then it becomes really interesting because every battery I'm going to buy at Norms Electric goes into a tractor, right? I mean, it makes you wonder how that's going to be, how's that going to be implemented? And another question I would have, and I'm not picking on anybody specifically, I shouldn't have picked on Norms Electric, but at D&B or Tractor Supply, how do you sort out what's agriculture versus non-agriculture at a place that sells a whole pile of both? Is that something that you'd want to address, or?
Well, this, again, not new territory. This is something that is a form. Our finance director would help me with the form number because we just followed the federal forms, and she's in the ag industry also, as her husband is. So she's a professional accountant, and her husband's a farmer. So what's the form number that we used? Yeah, Schedule F. So again, we were trying not to create extra work. It's something that's already filed with the federal government, and that's the same documentation we would use for an agricultural exemption.
You mentioned she works for the city, you mentioned she's on a farm, and you didn't even mention the kid in her arms. She's got a lot going on over there right now. So, other questions that I have are services, car wash. If I go to a car wash, is it exempt? It's a service. So my wandering mind says, if I go to see Debbie and I get an insurance policy, she's insuring me. Is that a service? She hands me a chunk of paper, which is an item, right? But it's a service. I'm just curious.
Let me just ask a question about that. What happens when you buy your newspaper? Is it a service, or are you buying a newspaper?
Were you reading my notes when you were up here? Or is the newspapers exempt?
The newspaper is a product.
Newspaper's a product, is what I've heard recently. Well, are groceries exempt?
It's a product and it's not exempt.
So, newspaper, what if groceries are not, or let's step ahead to groceries.
Not exempt.
Not exempt. So, if I go to a restaurant, they're providing the service of preparing me a meal. Is a restaurant exempt?
The restaurant would be taxed.
A restaurant would be taxed. Okay, because they're handing me my barley pop, and that's an item, even if it's open. They're doing the service. No, I'm totally drinking, but this feels more like a red wine evening after this. So, probably won't be any.
What of the newspaper? What of the newspaper? Is it a product that's exempt? Taxable?
I've heard recently it's
Taxable.
a product.
Okay, so on my monthly subscription to the newspaper, I will pay for it, unless I subscribe to the Vail newspaper. Exempt? Vail newspaper.
No, you're going to pay for it if you buy it on the rack at the co-op.
Okay. but
Because
if
it's
I
an
buy
item.
it in the internet. Exempt? Product.
We can't charge anything on the internet.
Okay. How about Red Apple, who pays $1,000 a month to the newspaper for advertising? Exempt? They're buying advertising.
That would be a service.
That's a service by the newspaper, but then the newspaper is taxable. So I'll pay a penny for every dollar I put on the newspaper. You're going to collect that, and they're going to implement that. Will they implement it for the folks they send it to out of state? Out of the area? Too many holes in it, folks. Too many holes.
So, remembering that we're in the Ontario Middle School Gymnasium and not acting like middle schoolers.
A car dealership is not taxed on the car, it's been previously taxed a 0.5%, if I'm correct on that. And then
I didn't hear you.
a car dealership is already taxed 0.5% in the state, but are there car parts that they sell in their maintenance, is that also exempt? Is there a dealership, or is that going to be taxed?
So if I buy one part of a car at a time, and it would be taxed, but if I bought the whole car at once, it wouldn't be. Okay. So is that your? I will say it's pretty admirable that everybody that's asking questions has introduced themselves, because this is not like that silly thumbs up, thumbs down thing that you do. I'll get right over to you guys, but I'll say this over here.
My name is Vicki Hines, and one of the things that you had said, Marty, are we a destination? I think actually what we are is a shopping pattern. We're not a destination. Other than, people who can't get loans and pay it, certain type might come to do me or whatever. So, personal opinion is that it's a shopping pattern. But kind of thinking about you the last week or so, and it is a question, I promise. So, in the real estate business, you have people who come in, and so you have someone come in and you usually have them qualify for a loan. So you have a clue how much money they can afford. So you probably wouldn't take someone who is qualified for a $125,000 home and show them a $500,000 home. Because their payment, the income that they have, it is not sustainable for that person to be shown something. So that at that point, they want something that's $500,000. You go to the community and say, hey, I've got this person who wants to buy this home, but they can't afford the down payment. Can you help pitch in to give this person this home that they want? Not need, but want. So, okay, just a minute. So it really, in the long run, is not a good thing because it's not sustainable. They cannot sustain the payment on a $500,000 home. They don't have the income to do it. You might be able to garner the money for a down payment by very generous people. So where I'm going with this is my whole issue, most of my whole issue, has to do with fiscal responsibility. If any one of us business owners, and if you look around the town, there are a ton of people that are business owners that have the no sales tax. Because as a business owner, we not only, how long has it been since you've done payroll? Do you know how long payroll takes to do that?
Is that your question?
No, so I know, I'm not trying to ramble, I promise. But as a city, why are you holding yourself to a different standard than the business owners that you're asking to collect this money? Why can the city not be fiscally responsible? I understand about PERS, but why is there overspending?
I would love to answer that question for you, but I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you because you have a tie.
Great. We are fiscally responsible. We go through our budget every single year. We have 7 citizens on the budget committee, and we have 7 counselors. We go line item by line item. We are fiscally responsible. We are living within our means. And to live within our means, we've made these severe cuts as we went along to live within our means.